Could Iran face renewed sanctions? The US president promises punishment after failing to convince the UN to extend the international arms embargo. Will this lead to the collapse of the 2015 nuclear deal? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Imran Khan. The US president is vowing retaliation for the latest setback to his so-called maximum pressure campaign on Iran. Donald Trump's threatening to reinstate international sanctions that were scrapped in 2015 when Iran signed the deal to limit its nuclear development. Trump's response followed the UN rejecting a US bid to extend the international arms embargo on Iran after it expires in October. Only the Dominican Republic supported the resolution. The remaining parties to the nuclear deal, Britain, Germany, France, China and Russia, question whether Trump can reinstate the sanctions. That's because he pulled the US out of the agreement 2 years ago. Trump has rejected Russian President Vladimir Putin's offer of a summit to discuss the dispute.
When will you trigger a snapback of sanctions on Iran?
Well, we knew what the vote was going to be, but we'll be doing a snapback. You'll be watching it next week. Yeah, you'll be watching it next week.
And if I could follow up, President Putin wants to hold a video summit on this subject.
He is.
Are you wanting to do that?
Probably not. No, I think we want to wait till after the election. Look, Iran wants me to lose so badly, because if they do, you know, Iran is a whole different ballgame right now.
Iran's president has welcomed what he called a humiliation for the US.
This is the first time the US proposed a resolution to the UN Security Council, and only a small island nation voted in favor of it. Look where America's efforts have got them. What a miserable situation they have reached. It was a political success for the Islamic Republic of Iran and a political and legal defeat for the US regime.
Let's bring in our panel. In Iran's capital, Hassan Ahmadian, Professor of Middle East Studies at the University of Tehran. From London, Holly Dagres, a non-resident fellow with the Atlantic Council's Middle East Programs. And from Nutley in New Jersey, Stephen Rogers, a US security and defense analyst, as well as a member of the Donald J. Trump for President Advisory Board. A welcome to you all. Let's begin in Tehran. Hassan, the Iranians are saying that this is a success, a victory for them. Why are they saying that?
Because the U.S. unilateral approach was, stopped at some point at the UN. You know, the United States has been using the UN, the main embodiment of multilateralism, to further their unilateral agenda against Iran. Their violation of the deal, which is a violation and extension, a violation of the international law, was not appeased at the UN, at the Security Council, by other members, including U.S. allies. That's why Iran is seeing it as a victory of it and of the remaining parties to the nuclear deal who didn't appease Trump and his team.
Stephen Nutley in New Jersey, Stephen Rogers, rather, in Nutley, New Jersey. This is a defeat for you guys, isn't it?
Certainly not. As a matter of fact, the objective was no doubt, at least in my mind, to an attempt to bring the United States to their knees and for the president not to go down the road he's presently going down. Look, this to me, again, I look at what's going on here, it's pretty much a defeat for everyone who went against the United States and not the United States. So the president is going to do what he must do. He has actually kept his pledge to the American people that he's looking out for the interest of American national security, and that's exactly what he's doing. No defeat here.
Well, there is, isn't there? Because he can't do what he's trying to do because they pulled out of the deal, the 2015 deal, so therefore he can't actually unilaterally himself say, OK, snap back sanctions, because he's not part of the deal anymore. The US isn't part of the deal anymore. He
can do under the snapback provision. He's going to do that, and he's going to do what he has to do, again, to look out for the interest of the American people and of the region.
Holly, let's bring you in here. You're a non-resident fellow with the Atlantic Council's Middle East Programs, a significant amount of experience when it comes to Iran and these negotiations. really what we're looking at now is a official or maybe even a clean break between the allies. So we're talking America, we're talking Germany, and we're talking France and Britain, who want this deal, but they're on different sides of the aisle, and America doesn't want this deal. So is that going to be a problem if the US tries to push these snapback sanctions through?
Well, essentially what happened on Friday was an embarrassment for the United States because they went in on this alone. And I think the fact that U.S. Special Envoy on Iran, Brian Hook, resigned just a week prior to this failed vote tells you that this so-called maximum pressure policy has been a maximum failure thus far. So what we're seeing here with this idea of a snapback mechanism coming forth in the coming weeks is that if we look at the text of actually what it says that you have to be a participant of the JCPOA, which technically speaking, the United States no longer is ever since U.S. President Donald Trump withdrew in May 2018. So I think that even if Pompeo, Secretary of State Pompeo, and the administration was to evoke these snapback sanctions, there's going to be a debate at the UN whether the United States is even a participant of the JCPOA, technically speaking. So I think that's going to be part of the debate in the coming weeks.
Hassan, in Tehran, if the US pushes these snapback sanctions and does it on its own, it does create a conflict within the UN Security Council itself, certainly. Is there an opportunity for Iran here to try and maneuver things in its favor, or do you think the US is simply going to do what it wants?
Well, the United States has been, as I said, unilateral when it comes to Iran. It has been isolated enough for Iran not to take any action, but let the other parties to the deal to tackle U.S.'s unilateralism. The United States, Trump's administration is now, coming back and trying to say and arguing that it's still part of the deal because it's a member of that deal within the, UN Security Council Resolution 2231. But itself, back in May 2018, announced, President Trump himself announced that the United States is no longer party to that deal. This is the main argument. And I think Russia and China have made it clear that they don't see the United States having the right to return to the deal, to violate the deal again and force others to violate the deal, and in extension to violate the international law. And Europeans are not siding with the United States, let alone China and Russia. And I think within this, circumstance, Iran won't act, take things to escalation further. But I think it will stick to this multilateral setting because what left of this deal is only this multilateral setting that is facing U.S.'s unilateralism. And Iran is using it against the United States, and I think it has been successful.
But Hassan, you might not have a choice. If the US puts the sanctions into place, it has the power and the ability to do so. Even if the Security Council, the other members of the Security Council say that it isn't part of the deal, it still actually can put sanctions in place. How are you going to deal with that?
Of course, it has sanctioned whatever it can, every relevant economic, financial entity in Iran related to Iran. So it doesn't have anything to, sanction more. It can go unilaterally and do snapback unilaterally with others, China, Russia, Europeans, saying that we are not abiding by this snapback. This won't change that much of the current equation in which the United States is unilaterally imposing sanctions and others are trying not to abide by those unilateral sanctions.
Holly, what do you think? Do you think that it really doesn't matter what the US does next if Russia and China aren't going to play ball?
I think it's a really complicated conversation we're having in terms of whether China and Russia are going to be playing ball or not. I think what's really happening here is that the Trump administration has realized that they are not getting a better deal than Barack Obama and that this is not going to happen. So we're looking at the polls here, and it looks that Trump may lose the election. Let's make sure that a Joe Biden presidency cannot come to the table and negotiate with the Iranians. This is what it's all about at this point. And I think that this is what the Trump administration is pushing for. Yes, we've heard President Trump say that he is willing to, not that he's willing, but he will have a deal within 4 weeks after the election. I think this is all about a domestic audience here and trying to say that he's made good on promises that he hasn't been able to keep because he's been dealt very bad advice from people in Washington.
Stephen Rogers has been dealt very bad advice from people in Washington. What is this all about then? Is this about November or is this about getting the right deal eventually?
I can tell you it's not about November because the American people are not particularly concentrating on what's going on with Iran. It's about trying to get a better deal. It always has been that way. And with regard to this embarrassing the United States, well, I've got to tell you, the American people still stand by President Donald Trump with regard to both domestic and foreign affairs. Iran is a terrorist state. They have contributed nothing to the peace of the world, let alone the region. And I think based on that, at the end of the day, the allies will side with the United States. Look, this is a family dispute with our allies. We've been down this road before. So at the end of the day, I believe that the Iranians are going to have no choice but to do exactly what the president has asked them to do. Look, they're hurting. We know their economy is in bad shape. They've got problems within their nation with their own people who want better relations with the United States. So we'll see at the end of the day how this pans out, but nothing to do with an election. My goodness, we have issues here that are very important, that the people of this country are more focused on that than what's happening in Iran.
Well, the polls suggest that actually Donald Trump is not doing that well. Also, Iran actually did, and according to any reading of the deal, stick to the deal and what it agreed to. Hassan Ahmadian, is that a fair representation? Do you think Iran did stick to the deal? Or, as Stephen Rogers has just called you, are you a terrorist state in need of bringing down?
Well, Rogers, the description of Iran's situation, if you take Iran out, the terrible things inside, the failure in the economic sphere, the isolation, if you take Iran's name out and put the United States there, you'd see that fits more, I think, in this time. That's why Trump is in trouble. I think he is certainly trying to use some, deal here or there to project some achievement, which he failed to achieve in the past 3 years through the maximum pressure on Iran and other nations. As we speak, 27 nations are under U.S. sanctions. This is not the United States has extensively used sanctions against nations for its own political and unilateral goals that I think Iran is not, buying anymore. And I think Iran has been standing up to it. And I think the Chinese, Russians, and other parties, U.S. allies themselves, are not buying U.S. arguments when it comes to Iran. Iran has stuck to its end of the deal. A year after U.S. withdrew from the deal and reimposed sanctions that were lifted as part of the deal. So the lawbreaker here is the United States, not Iran. Everyone knows that. The United States has the power, the economic and financial power to inflict pain on the Iranians, on the people of Iran, but it cannot change their, the reality that it is the lawbreaker that violated international law.
If what you're saying is true and the US is the lawbreaker here, why even bother continuing down the path of trying to save this agreement? Why not just rip it up and start again with a new agreement led by China or Russia and with the rest of the member states of the UN Security Council either accepting it or not? Why try and save this deal?
That's exactly what's happening with the United States out of the deal, the Iran nuclear deal. Now it's up to China, Russia, and the Europeans and Iran to decide for the deal how to go forward. The United States is unhappy with this reality. It wants to terminate this deal to have, another deal that it can be part of it. Iran is refusing that, and other parties also are refusing that. based on their, dignity, basically, because the United States didn't take anyone's advice, even its, allies in Europe, Merkel, President Macron. They advised President Trump not to violate the deal, but he did. So this is a matter of unilateralism vis-a-vis multilateralism. Iran is sticking to the deal because it doesn't want another deal that can be terminated whenever the United States wants.
Holly, I'm going to ask you the same question. Is it time for Iran to negotiate a different deal led by either Russia or China and just forget this American deal completely?
Well, I think this deal, the JCPOA that is, took years to negotiate. It's not a two-page paper like with North Korea, and it was signed by numerous countries. And what's going on here is essentially Iran is strategically waiting. They're strategically patient. They wanted to see what happens with the outcome of the election. Of course, they were also waiting for this UN Security Council vote. And for all we know, that this election could really be the determining factor on how Iran reacts. Iran can withdraw from the deal afterwards and also withdraw from the nuclear non-proliferation treaty, depending on who takes office January 2021. And I think this is something that Iranian officials have threatened in the past. And I think right now, again, going back to what I said initially, it really does come down to November and what happens then at the polls in the United States.
Stephen Rogers, what happens if Trump wins the election and he says 4 weeks later we're going to have this brand new deal, it's going to be great? What is that deal and why would Iran sign it?
Well, to begin with, we don't know what the president will do after he gets reelected. But I could tell you this, he's been very consistent in looking out for the best interests of the American people. It's no secret, that's been his pledge. The national security of the United States and of that region is of paramount importance to him. So he'll go down the same road, and it's always been Iran. Iran needs to become part of the peaceful world, the world that and these nations that are looking for peace.
It signed the JCPOA. It did do what you asked it to do. What's changed? That's what I'm asking.
Look, I believe that most people, reasonable people, are looking at Iran as a terrorist state. Look, they're creating trouble around the world in the region. So I think that has a lot to do with decision making. Once again, Iran should be doing more listening than playing politics. This has nothing to do with the election. I hear about polls. You guys talked about polls. Well, first of all, those are the same pollsters that said Hillary Clinton was going to win by a landslide. So they better understand that they're going to be dealing with President Trump again well after November, and they're going to have to change their behavior because this is all about their behavior. And by the way, the sanctions are not designed to punish the Iranian people. They're great people. They want good relations with the United States. It's designed to punish the Iranian regime, and they need to wake up and understand they're going to be dealing with this president for a long time.
Hassan, that is an opinion that you've heard 1,000 times, I'm sure, from people within the administration. How do you negotiate with that? Like, where is your leverage here?
Well, Iran's leverage is the fact that it has been true to its word, whereas the United States hasn't been true to its word, and it's being rewarded. Just 2 days ago, the UN Security Council rewarded Iran by refusing U.S., the so-called leader of the free world, as they would like to call it, by refuting its proposition. I think that the American people should know that their government is really using their tax money to in a campaign against Iran that have nothing to do whatsoever with their national interest or security. They are supporting medieval regimes in our region, bombing the hell out of Yemen. But when it comes to Iran, they say, well, Iran is a terrorist nation. For what I know, the terrorist is who tries to inflict pain on ordinary Iranians and not letting them get the medicine and food they need to fight the coronavirus. That is what the United States government, not the great American people, have been doing. And I think that is clear on the Iranian side. So this is hypocrisy to say that we are okay with the Iranian people, they are a great nation, but we are dealing with a bad regime. That has nothing to do with the reality on the ground. You are doing a collective punishment on all Iranians because they have.
Hassan, we are running out of time.
We
are running out of time, and I would like to get to the other guests as well. Holly, you've heard two positions there, very entrenched, very classic positions in many ways when it comes to Iran and the US. Is there a way out of this particular deal that benefits both parties, or are we at the stage now where the deal is just going to fail?
Well, I should note that there was a way out of all this when Trump took office. He could have used the Iran nuclear agreement as a confidence-building measure to build upon all the other issues that the United States has with Iran, be it its malign behavior or its ballistic missiles program and human rights. But the Trump administration essentially decided to pull out of the deal because President Donald Trump wanted to stick it to Barack Obama. And that's really what this all comes down to. And unfortunately, we're in this situation where there's really, to an extent, one path, and that seems to be that the Trump administration is taking, which is more maximum pressure that nobody's really adhering to. And if we really wanted to see this change, there's several ways to do this. I think that invoking the snapback sanctions, that's something the Trump administration can decide not to do. It could say that, listen, we're not snapping back these sanctions, but we do want to do something. We want to make this deal work. But the Iranians are going to come out and say, well, you know, this guy may or may not be elected in November. So I think that no matter what happens from now till November, we're still going to be going down the path that is. And we're just going to have to wait and see what happens then.
Stephen Rogers, it's very likely next week that we are going to be talking about the introduction of new sanctions, the snapback. President Trump has said he will announce it. What does that mean for this administration? What does it mean? When he says sanctions, snapback sanctions, are we talking back to before 2015, or are we talking even more aggressive sanctions than before?
Well, that's something that is going to be determined between now and next week. But I could tell you this, that the Obama deal was bad. It was not good for the United States. And you asked the question, well, is there a solution to the problem? And the solution is Iran saying, hey, look, let's sit down and talk. Let's renegotiate this deal, make it a deal where it is satisfactory to everyone. It's not as satisfactory to the United States. The president has made that very clear. So that's the way forward. But we're not there yet, and hopefully we'll get there as long as Iran begins to wake up and understand that they're dealing with a president who is going to keep his word to the American people. That's what counts here, what's going on with the American people. So let's hope moving forward we could come to an agreement. At this point, we could agree to disagree.
Hassan in Tehran, I want to have give you the last question here. Has Iran played it badly? It knows that President Donald Trump doesn't like any of the agreements that the last administration signed with anybody. So instead of battling the JCPOA, why didn't it just say, OK, if you want to change some parts of the agreement, we'll go back to the table, we'll change some parts of the agreement. And in fact, if you want, we'll call it the TCPOA, the Trump Comprehensive Plan of Action. Why didn't they do that?
Well, because there was a deal and everyone was sticking to it, but Trump. He had a personal issue with Obama. That's why he wanted to undo Obama. But this is not how international politics and international law works. A country that when a president signs a deal, it's a obligation of that country, not the president who goes and another president comes to terminate the deal. If we do that, if Iranians do that, the Iranian officials do that, then there won't be any guarantee that the next president will stick to the same obligations that Trump terminated, or the TCPOA, the Trump JCPOA, would last during the next administration in the United States. So it's a flawed logic that Iran is refusing to adhere to, and I think it has been accepted by other parties to the deal as well.
I want to thank all our guests, Hassan, Ahmadian, Holly Dagres and Stephen Rogers, and thank you too for watching. You can see the programme again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, go to our Facebook page, that's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. And you can also join the conversation on Twitter. We're at AJ Inside Story. From me, Imran Khan, and the whole team here in Doha, bye for now.